Hi everyone, my name is Rose, also known as TA Summers. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is kind of a last minute video in a sense because this is the final round of the Goodreads Choice Awards. It is Sunday that I'm filming this, so I'm hoping to get this video up shortly after I record it, but I'm essentially going through my final picks for the categories I did not vote in my initial video. I'll leave a link up to where I walk through all the categories, the nominees, as well as my picks for who I want to win, essentially in the final round of the Goodreads Choice Awards. So that'll be in the link down below and also in the tags here. But I did not vote in 3 categories, so this is going to be the former follow-up to that. And also I picked up a number of different Goodreads nominees across the opening round as well as the final round from my library. So I'm going to go through all the books that I put on my TBR that I'm planning on reading and filming my thoughts about these particular books in future videos. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. I think it's easier for me to just go through what my picks were first of all and then give you my TBR for the Goodreads Choice Awards nominees. So let's start there. First category that I'm going to kind of like go into in terms of who I want to win is romance, because that was very easy for me to pick, especially since I'm 54% into this particular book and I love it a lot. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did once I picked it up, but Book Lovers by Emily Henry. And essentially what Book Lovers is about is a literary agent named Nora who is basically a cutthroat literary agent. She sells she's able to sell books and get them marketed and things like that, but she's not exactly well liked in the industry. And to take a break from her work, she goes on a trip with her sister Libby to kind of unwind from the day-to-day perils of the job and kind of relax a bit, since she has such a rigid reputation. But then she runs into one of her rivals in the literary industry named Charlie, who is in, I believe it's Sunshine Falls, North Carolina. So essentially this is a novel where she's navigating trying to unwind and try to be a different person in terms of being less like of the stereotype that she's put against, and also kind of finding a connection with Charlie. I'm really enjoying it so far. It was not one that I expected to enjoy as much as I were. I love the audiobook version. I was able to pick up the audiobook from my library, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So I know that I'm probably going to be able to finish it soon and have a review up for it. But I definitely knew that I wanted to vote for it in the final round of the Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Romance. So that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Next category that I want to talk about is actually a mystery and thriller, and this one I had a little bit of a harder time deciding what I wanted to choose, but ultimately it was between 2 books that I had picked up from my library and audio, or one of them I bought and the other one I picked up from my library. So the one that I bought was The Maid by Nita Prose, which I'll put the cover up here for your reference. I actually gravitated to this particular clue-like mystery from the eyes of a 25-year-old who is bad on social cues and is essentially a maid, but she comes across a dead body of someone and is actually trying to prove that she did not commit the crime that happened in one of the rooms that she's set to clean. So I gravitated to that pretty readily, like when I started reading it. I'm not too far into it, but I'm really enjoying it so far. The other book that I had on my list to potentially decide whether or not it was something that I was going to choose in the final round for my vote was The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. And unfortunately, I've gotten into a little bit of The Paris Apartment and it's not my cup of tea. I'm still going to finish it, but I knew that between the 2 of those, I wanted the Nita Prose book to win, so my pick was for The Maid. by Nita Prose, and I'll have a more lengthy and detailed review of that once I finish it. And the final pick that I wanted to feature is for the best fiction category in the Goodreads Choice Awards. I had two books that I had in mind that I wanted to undo, either Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, or Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. And unfortunately, I did order Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin as one of my Book of the Month picks for December, but unfortunately it's not going to arrive in time for me to be able to read that in full. So I gravitated towards choosing Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen, and I've started a little bit of it so far, and it's right up my alley in terms of Sarah Addison Allen's writing, and what I'm familiar with from her style. And for some reason, I'm not 100% sure why I thought it was a collection of short stories. It's not. It's a regular novel, but it's essentially a magical realism story that takes place in an apartment, and goes through a diverse cast of characters within that particular apartment. But I'll have a full review of Other Birds when I have the opportunity to finish it. But I did choose that as my Goodreads Choice Award winner for the best fiction, namely because it was the first one that I started, and unfortunately, I have not been able to pick up any of the other nominees, but they are on my overall TBR, and I hope to get to them as I can get to them. So now we come to the second part of this particular video, where I'm going to go through my TBR of the Goodreads Choice Awards nominees, whether they were in the opening round or whether they were in the final round of voting. I have added these to my TBR, and I picked them up from the library very recently, actually, probably within the last within the last week. I was able to visit my library and pick up a number of these different titles. So I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. I will have more expanded thoughts on them in a later video as I read them, or later videos as I read them. So without further ado, I'm going to just go through them quickly. I did talk about how I had a copy of Sarah Addison Allen's Other Birds. I got this from Book of the Month, so this is not one of the ones that is from the library. And also, I am planning on reading R.F. Kuang's Babel, which I own already, but that was not one of my library things. So I just wanted to get that out of the way so that there's no confusion. There are some Goodreads picks that I own that I do plan on getting to eventually to be able to read, but this next section is essentially highlighting the ones that I was able to pick up from the library. So let's go ahead and go. So this first one that I want to highlight is one that I'm surprised did not make out of the opening round for the best mystery thriller category in the Goodreads Choice Awards. This is More Than You'll Ever Know by Katie Gutierrez. And essentially this is a past and present type story, which highlights a crime writer who is in the present day, highlighting a series of crimes that happened in the 1980s. And you're also following a woman in the 1980s who is discovered leading a double life after her husband is murdered. I thought that was a very promising premise for a mystery thriller novel. I haven't heard a lot of people who have read this, unfortunately, so I'm going to take on the task of being able to read it for myself and give you my thoughts about it. So that is More Than You'll Ever Know by Katie Gutierrez. And next one that I want to feature is actually a book that I have already read, and it was nominated as the best middle grade in children's. So essentially, this made it to the opening round and through the final round. So it's up for grabs in terms of the award. I'm not sure if it's going to win, but it was definitely a strong contender, and I actually love the book. This is Witchlings by Claribel A. Ortega, and this is the first one in the Witchling series. I'm going to have a review for this up in a separate video, so I'm not going to talk about it too much in this, but I've already read it. I gave this 4 stars. I really loved it. It was a hard decision to make between this book as well as Amari and the Great Game, but I will definitely have reviews up for this as well as Amari and the Great Game as soon as I can do them. Next one I want to feature is also a book that was nominated for the Best Middle Grade Children's in the Goodreads Choice Awards. And this one, unfortunately, did not make it to the past the opening round into the final round, but it is one that is on my TBR, and I was able to pick it up from my library. I've heard very mixed opinions about it, but I'm still going to read it. This is The Marvelers by Danielle Clayton, and I believe this may be her first middle grade title. I've read several of her YA titles and I have had mixed opinions about them, but this was one that caught my eye, and I'm going to give it a chance and see how it is. And I will definitely let you know my thoughts about it once I'm done with it. Next category that I am going to talk about, and the next book that I'm going to talk about, is actually one that did end up making the final round, and it is one that I voted for, and I talked about voting for it earlier, but I'm actually reading it and I'm almost done with it now. I'm probably about 50% in. This is Amanda Gorman's Call Us What We Carry. And this is essentially a collection of poems that were written by Amanda Gorman about the beginning of the pandemic and dealing with a lot of different emotions and trauma and things like that that are highlighted in her poetry that are wonderfully done. I expected it to like it, and I like it a lot. I'll have a full review of this as soon as I possibly can, but I was able to pick it up from my library, and I'm flying through it, but I definitely want to give it a proper review in terms of everything that it delves into and give you my thoughts about it. So that is Amanda Gorman, Call Us What We Carry. So this next book was actually nominated for, I believe, Best Fantasy in the Goodreads Choice Awards, but it did not make it past the opening round. And this is the like one of the books that I'm really most interested to read from T. Kingfisher. Unfortunately, I have not read T. Kingfisher as far as I know of yet, but this really caught my eye. This is T. Kingfisher's Nettle and Bone. As you can see, this is a really pretty cover, and I actually like the premise of this. I will give you my thoughts about it as soon as I possibly can, and it is relatively short. Let me see how many pages this is. This is 243 pages, so I should be able to fly through this. So I will prioritize this on my reading list and give you my thoughts about it as soon as I possibly can. So this next book was actually one that was featured in the opening round of the Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Fiction, but it did not make it past the opening round. And this is an author that I have read before and loved, and I was curious about being able to pick it up. This is Diane Chamberlain's The Last House on the Street. And this is another one where it takes place in two alternate timelines to cover the stories of the women who are essentially tied by the same house in terms of a series of different events. So I'm excited to be able to read it. I know that from hearing from other people that it touches on a heavy subject matter, but usually Chamberlain's writing is really evocative, and I like how she handles difficult subjects. One of my favorite books by her was actually, I believe it was called Necessary Lies. I just thought of it. But Necessary Lies is one of my favorite books by Diane Chamberlain. So I am excited to be able to get to The Last House of the Street on the Street. I think this is the first one I've read from her in a while, but I will definitely give you my thoughts about it once I finish it. Technically speaking, this the sequel to this particular novel was nominated in Best Romance, I believe, for the Goodreads Choice Awards, but it didn't make it past the opening round. And since I have not read the second book in this series, I kind of wanted to pick up the first to see what it was about and how it basically presented itself in order to be able to read the sequel. I've heard polarized opinions about this particular book, but I'm still excited to be able to get to it and read it for myself to see what my thoughts are on about it. So this is The X Hex by Aaron Sterling. And the sequel to this is actually The Kiss Curse, which I will put on the screen for your reference here. But I do want to read this and even possibly get to The Kiss Curse as soon as I possibly can. But I wanted to get to the through the X Hex first before I even tackle that one. So this is again the X Hex by Aaron Sterling. Alright, so we're down to the last two books that I'm going to feature in this book haul that encompasses some of the Goodreads Choice Awards finalists, and these are actually two books that made it into the final round for Best YA. So I've had these on my TBR for quite some time, but I have not had the opportunity to be able to read them. So first up, and they're highly requested. I'm not 100% sure how I was lucky enough to be able to grab these, but I'm glad that I was, and so I hope to get to them very soon so that I don't get into a situation where I have to return them before I can read them. So the first one is a very popular title from a very popular author. This is Casey McQuiston's I Kiss Sarah Wheeler. And as you can see, this is the cover for it. I am excited to be able to get to this. I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I'm hoping to be able to get to it pretty soon. And the last one is actually one that won the National Book Award, and I mentioned it in my previous video in terms of wanting to be able to get to it, but unfortunately I couldn't vote for this particular book because I had not read it, but so I voted for Marissa Petty's I Must Betray You, because I love that book so much this year, and it was one of my favorite reads of the year. But if I had not read that, or if I had read this particular book before, it may be that I would have voted for this. And I know so many people who have also voted for this particular book, but this is All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. And I'm really excited to be able to get to this pretty soon and see what it's about for myself. So I'm very excited to get to it, and I'll give you my thoughts about it in a future video. So that is it for my both my TBR and my very last minute picks for the Goodreads Choice Awards in those respective categories. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next video.